Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, August 1st, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about brand new data out of Gallup today showing that Democrats have now regained their advantage in party affiliation across the country despite record low favorability ratings that we haven't seen for the Democratic Party in a very long time. The new data point from Gallup, they've tracked this time and time again. Every single quarter, they release data saying whether or not Democrats or Republicans are in the advantage in terms of party affiliation. Democrats now getting back to this point seems to be very interesting, especially given that the Democratic Party and the way that many people view it across this country has, again, like I mentioned, reached a record low. Now, the Republican Party actually started out this year with an advantage in party affiliation. This was about the time that I started posting again when Donald Trump was inaugurated into office, and it came in right after the 2024 election, and especially around the 2024 election when Republican Party affiliation actually held one of its highest points that we'd seen in a while. The GOP holding the edge across the board here showed that by the time you reached the start of the year, even in 2024, Republicans did hold that narrow advantage, but it was even higher around the time you reached 2025. And so looking at the 2025 year and looking at what was the most interesting about it, which is that coming off of 2024, there was a lot of gains that Republicans had made from beginning of 24 to the end. Right? In terms of overall party affiliation, we can actually see that tracked on this data point where you'll find that it was in quarter one that, yes, Democrats had that slight upper hand. But averaging out across the three, Republicans ended up with a full total 2024 advantage that left them with a third year of consistent leads amongst the Republican Party. Whereas under Trump 1, we saw that Democrats maintained an advantage. Even under Obama, we saw that Democrats maintained an advantage that wasn't happening under Biden. And it actually makes a bit of sense too, right? Biden was an unpopular president. Voters weren't thrilled with the Democratic Party. They felt disaffected with the way that Democrats had handled their majority that was ushered in after the 2020 election and felt like they weren't doing enough of what they promised and what they said they were going to do. And so now seeing Democrats get back in that support, a lot of it, I think, really does have to do with Donald Trump and the way that people perceive him. Because the big point for me, too, is that by quarter four, around the time we reached the election, was that Republicans had reached their highest point of the year, their highest point of 2 to 3 years, actually. A 4-point advantage across the state, across the country, which showed that more people were willing to identify and say they lean Republican rather than they say the same about the Democratic Party. And it is moments like this that really show you that the perception of the party and the willingness of someone to come forth and say, I align or lean towards a political party does also tell you a lot about what you might be able to expect in that year's election. Now, it doesn't tell you everything, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that I don't think that this is one of the most important factors in predicting a midterm or presidential election, but it certainly does confirm some of our suspicions around the 2024 election, especially around the shifts that we saw amongst minority voters, amongst young men in specific, that it becomes less cool to say you're a Democrat and more cool to say you're a Republican. And in terms of overall affiliation and willingness to say affiliation, really does show that, at least optically speaking, Republicans were winning that battle. And so having that 4-point advantage at the end of 2024, I think, was the note that made sense that we were leaving off of. Donald Trump had the largest victory he had seen ever in his electoral history, larger than 2016, obviously larger than his loss in 2020. And so in 2024, winning all of the 7 swing states also made a huge difference. But now Democrats getting back to this point, where they were roughly tied in the beginning of quarter one, where Republicans and Democrats started to see more of a coalition building around both political parties. Democrats getting back to this advantage point, I really think is fascinating, and I think has everything to do with the way that voters view Donald Trump. Like I said, when you look at the year-by-year basis, even under Trump 1, Democrats maintained that advantage, and that's because I think Trump was so unpopular that it made it difficult for voters to say that they were aligned with the Republican Party. By the time you had reached Biden had become so unpopular that it became the same thing for the Democratic Party, and now we're starting to see the exact same thing turn around. And it's good news for Democrats, because if voters feel more comfortable saying that they consider themselves a Democrat rather than a Republican, there's reasons for that. And there's reasons why there are voters out there that say, I might have voted for Trump, but I don't agree with the things that he's doing. I don't agree with the Medicaid cuts. I don't agree with the mass deportations. I don't agree with X, Y, and Z. And it makes voters less likely to affiliate with a party, and it also, just generally speaking, decreases the amount of enthusiasm that voters have to vote for their respective political party. Right? What we had known in years past was that in midterm elections, typically speaking, low turnout elections actually favored the Republican Party. In 2012, Democrats had a higher turnout election, and they won 201 seats. In 2010, though, 2 years prior, a way lower turnout election, Democrats were at 193. By 2014, again, remember, 201 dropped all the way down to 188, because turnout had reached one of the lowest points we had seen in a very, very long time. We can actually pull it up here if it'll load. The point is that turnout across the country in 2014 actually rivaled that of about 36 percentage points, down 16%. 16% downward trend, 36% turnout. But now in the more recent days, I think a big reason for this was because Obama was president. If turnout is down, Democrats actually do better. A lot of Democrats are very excited and enthusiastic about voting in any type of election that they can get their hands on. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that Donald Trump won the last election, and they are largely upset with him. Because political party members, especially Republicans, might see this as just the status quo and say, okay, I'm happy with Trump. There's no reason for me to get out and vote, versus Democrats who are angry and excited and say, I want new leadership. They're going to organize, they're going to mobilize, and they are going to turn out and vote. And that's the way that midterms work. Typically speaking, the incumbent party is complacent, and that's where opposition parties come in and win House elections, Senate elections, governor elections, and often to the surprise of the political party that is in power. And I don't think Republicans would be shocked to think Donald Trump is barricading himself and preparing for an eventual loss in 2026 and is doing everything he can to mitigate said loss, like redraw the states in Texas, potentially Florida and Indiana and Missouri. We'll see the extent at which he goes. But the point is that they see data points like this and they see the American public is turning on them. That Donald Trump is more unpopular today than he was a month ago, than he was 2 months ago, than he was 4 months ago, than he was at the start of his presidency, and that makes a huge difference. That voters have gone from the beginning of Trump 2 with near tied affiliation with the Democrats to now losing it on the national stage for the first time since the beginning of 2024, and before then, since before 2023. I mean, you have to go back years to find the time at which Democrats maintained this advantage, and I don't think that it necessarily means everything. I think Republicans could find themselves tied on election day 2026 and still lose the House majority, because I don't expect, even if voters are saying I'm, equally as likely to say you're a Republican as Democrat in terms of treating the voting universe as one collective, you're going to find that doesn't make a difference in terms of who actually turns out on election day. But what it does show is, optically speaking, the Republican Party has a problem. Because I don't believe 43% of Americans say they are Republican or lean Republican. I think that number is closer to about 47, 48%. For Democrats, too, they obviously have an optics problem, too, if they are at their most unpopular point right now. But still, it is certainly worth mentioning that if the party is as unpopular as Republicans say, because the party is unpopular, no one will vote for them, that's not the case. I have to be so painstakingly honest with people when they bring up that point, because I do think it is worth saying that just because you disapproved of the mainstream Democratic Party does not mean that you won't vote for them. Just because you say, if you're a registered Democrat or an independent that leans left, I think that there needs to be new leadership and therefore I'm unhappy with the way the Democrats are, doesn't mean you won't vote for Democrats in the midterm elections. What it does mean is that you're upset with the way the political party is going and you want to see change. Just because you want to see change doesn't mean you won't vote for said candidate. I mean, this is the same thing that we saw with Republicans time and time again. A lot of Republicans disapproved of Trump. Did that mean they didn't vote for him? No. He won 2 elections and nearly won that third in 2020, right? Even though his approval rating amongst Republicans was lower than that at the time, not in 2024, but especially in 2016, lower than that of what we had seen of any previous Republican nominee, people were expecting a mass exodus amongst the Republican Party even after January 6th. But it didn't happen. You can be disaffected with your political party and still vote for them. And I think that's where you're starting to see this. But I do think it's worth mentioning that even with all of these negative hits on the Democratic Party and their approval rating being the lowest point they've ever seen, Democrats still maintaining this advantage in the party affiliation survey is fascinating, because it really shouldn't be this way. Democrats, in theory, if their approval rating was correlated with actual vote share, should be losing. But they're not to the degree that voters and pundits are promising are going to happen. That's why 2026 will likely go in a way that many Republicans are going to be caught blindsided, even though Donald Trump and his administration knows they're going to lose, because they are also counting on those data points to be reality, when in most circumstances, it just explains that a lot of Democrats who are still going to vote Democrat just want new leadership and are upset with the current state of the party. But getting back to this point about Gallup, I think that also, too, looking at it from just the perspective of Republicans having this advantage going into an election that they win, if Democrats can maintain this into 2026, it'll make sense that they win the midterm elections. It'll make sense that the voters are more likely to say they're a Democrat than a Republican, that the average voter getting out to vote will already skew towards the left, but even more so by that point. Maybe the victory for Democrats in 26 will be a little bit more toned down if Democrats have just a 1 or 2 point advantage on the national stage versus a 3, 4, 5 point advantage that they've seen in years past. And that's probably true. And so we'll see. By the time we reach November 2026, I'm sure these data points will fluctuate back and forth. Republicans will have a shining moment. I mean, even at the beginning of 2024, Democrats had a 2 point advantage, but we saw by election day in around Q4, lost by about 4 points on the Gallup numbers here. That's about a 6 point swing in just about a year. Same thing could happen in 2025. But for the first time since the election, and for the first time since Biden was the nominee in January of 2024, Democrats have this advantage. And we'll see how long they maintain it, how long they're able to keep it up between now and November of 2026, because it could be a good indicator for general sentiment and general feelings and vibes around the Democratic Party and what it might mean for a contentious midterm election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.